Welcome to episode 105 of the Family Answer Man podcast. Today we're talking about understanding and dealing with dementia from a biblical worldview. I'm David Orgis. I am your host, and I'm here with Dr. Mark Crosby. He is a pastor, he's an educator, he's a mental health professional, and he is our resident expert here on the Family Answer Man podcast. Now, Family Answer Man is not a therapy session. We're not able to answer specific questions that you may have or give specific advice, but we do believe that mental health and spiritual health are very important. So we encourage you to seek in-depth answers to your questions from a professional, whether it's professional counselor or from your pastor, for your unique circumstances. Before we jump in today, I want to go ahead and just ask you to hit the notification bell so that you never miss an episode of the Family Answer Man. If you have not subscribed, if you would do that, that helps us out a lot. The more subscribers we have, the more it actually pushes this podcast out to additional people, and it helps to grow our audience. Also, as always, you can help grow the Family Answer Man community by sharing this show with your friends and your family so they can join you on this journey of building stronger, healthier, happier families. Dr. Mark, good to be here with you today.
Yes, indeed.
It's a very relevant topic that we have today. It is relevant for a lot of people on a personal level, and may possibly even be relevant on a national level.
Yes.
If people want to get in touch with us, they can email us at familyanswerman@liveoak.com.
That's right.
We love getting those questions and answering those questions. But today, as we look at this topic of dementia, this is, do you find that there are things that kind of come into the public consciousness that become more popular when it comes to mental health issues, just depending on certain circumstances?
I mean, over the years, we've seen certain buzzwords kind of take hold, or diagnostic buzzwords, I should say, such as years ago, everybody had some sort of bipolar disorder. Right. I mean, everybody was bipolar.
Yeah.
Okay. If you didn't like somebody, they're bipolar.
They're bipolar.
Okay? Right. And then all of a sudden, a few years later, everybody was a narcissist.
Right.
You know, if you didn't like somebody, or if they had any type of, sense of domination over you or any type of aggression towards you, they were a narcissist.
Right.
And now it's dementia. Anybody who cannot remember someone's name, anybody who maybe gets lost,
Which could be all of us at some point, right?
Exactly. Everybody lose their keys or anything along those lines. They're all of a sudden now struggling with dementia. And so these buzzwords, these diagnostic buzzwords, seem to find their way in our culture and our society for a variety of reasons. Again, these are the words that they're hearing maybe on the news, various broadcasts, etc. And in some cases, there may be some legitimacy to that. I know with years ago, the movie The Notebook came out. Yeah. And it basically gave a description of sorts in the cinema of what Alzheimer's looks like. And here you had this husband and wife trying to connect with each other through this severe mental illness. Yeah. And it's a very well done movie, and I know people have watched it over and over again. But it gave some insight as to what Alzheimer's may look like. And of course, now there's the presidential debate. And a lot of people are using the word dementia. I mean, people who are both pro and against, the president currently, is struggling with this issue of dementia. Is there dementia going on? And there's a great deal of debate about that. So this word is out and about because of our politics, because of movies that we're watching, and just because we're seeing an aging population. Yeah. Our parents are living longer in many cases. Our grandparents are living longer in many cases. So we're starting to see this come into play as various physicians and other mental health professionals are looking at this subject of dementia.
So a lot of times when these topics come up, you mentioned a couple in the past, the current one being dementia. The psychological buzzwords that happen. I know it brings a lot of additional consciousness, which can be helpful for people that, hey, maybe I recognize this in a loved one that I have. Right. Do you find that the kind of the public perception usually aligns with what the scientific community and the psychological community is, or do you find that those are maybe a little bit different?
I think, again, people are using these words in some cases and not quite sure of the diagnostic symptoms. For example, everyone was bipolar years ago if you were not for them, if you were against them, if you were somehow, saying things that were unkind about them, they're just bipolar. And in many cases, they were not, okay, because they did not meet what we call the diagnostic criteria. I think same is true with narcissism, same is true with dementia. Just because a person wants to look nice in public doesn't mean they're a narcissist. It may be, but it doesn't mean, necessarily they are.
Yeah.
And the same is true with dementia. Just because a person can't find their car keys, or they lose their phone consistently, or they maybe got lost, as far as the directions to their, friend's new home, that doesn't mean they have dementia. It could be, but it doesn't mean necessarily they do. So these are things we have to be careful of. But I think as we are more and more aware of some of the symptoms, as we have more and more access via internet and other modes of learning, that we can become more aware of what some of these symptoms may be. And therefore, our diagnosis, our lay diagnosis, if you will, in some cases, most cases, may be somewhat accurate.
There we go. Well, that's a great segue into the question that we have for today, because the question is about dementia. And it says this. It says, my mother is in her late 70s, and she's starting to forget names, to get lost when she drives, and her mood seems to change so easily.
Wow.
Could this be dementia? And if so, what do we do?
So again, dementia is an umbrella term. It's an umbrella term for mental decline, for memory disorder, for impaired reasoning, and any personality change. So again, it's this umbrella term that we are using to basically try to define or diagnose and categorize what's going on with our loved ones, our patients, etc. Again, the most common diagnostic label is Alzheimer's. We've heard that. We've all heard of that diagnosis. And that's often due to these amyloid plaques that occur in our brain, or some sort of tau protein tangles that happen in our brain. Or in some cases, there's vascular dementia, which again leads to stroke. So anytime the brain is being damaged on a cellular level, you're starting to see, again, these symptoms that may lead to dementia. Unfortunately, the problem with dementia is that very little can be done. So in many cases, though this is a diagnosis, in most cases this is a classification given to create an understanding or tolerance among the family or friends. So in other words, if your physician says, I'm afraid your mother has dementia, there's very little they can do. Depending on what stage. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what that does do, it gives the family some sense of classification as to what's going on with my parent and what we can do to help make their life better, make their life easier, be more understanding, be more tolerant of maybe their behaviors, etc. So the question many ask is, when do we need to be concerned? And I would argue that you need to be concerned when you see a loved one or a patient that has chronic poor judgment. And in other words, they decide to go shopping at 2 a.m, meaning that most stores are closed at 2 a.m, okay? But that's when they decide to go shopping instead of going at 2 p.m. I'm not saying shopping at 2 a.m. is a poor judgment necessarily, but if it's out of the norm, if it's because if
most things that you do at 2 a.m. are poor judgment.
Yeah. If you go try to go to a store that's already closed,
right?
That's using poor judgment. Or chronic bad choices. In other words, you're constantly buying things you don't need. You're constantly buying things you really can't afford. You're constantly going places that you really shouldn't be going to. You're constantly saying things or doing things that would be considered inappropriate or improper. So chronic bad choices, especially when it's out of character for that person. One that I think is most important is when you lose track of time, season, day, or year. In other words, it's maybe 9 o'clock in the morning and you're telling everybody good night. Or whatever. You don't know what season it is. It's maybe, mid-July and you're starting to dress as if it's, 20 below zero outside. You're not sure what day it is. You went to church yesterday, but you'd think today is Saturday. Right. Kind of thing. You're not sure what year it is. You start saying, and talking about, and maybe this is the year, 1974 instead of 2024 or whatever. And so you're constantly losing track of time, season, day, or year. Not only that, when you lose things but can't retrace your steps. Now, we all lose things. We lose our phone, we lose our keys, and so forth. But most of us can retrace our steps. Where did I have it last? Where did I use it last? And have a pretty good idea of where they may have lost their keys or their phone, what have you. But this person cannot retrace their steps. They have no idea, no memory of when they last had their phone or their keys in their pocket. When there's no structured reasoning. In In other words, they're saying things and doing things that have absolutely no rhyme or reason to it, and so there's no structured reasoning. Problems that we have with what we call brain endurance. And brain endurance is a fancy way of simply saying maybe a loss of attention span. You just cannot sit and listen for more than 10 minutes or whatever. You're not able to focus on what you're doing. You're constantly easily distracted. You have a loss of smell. You don't smell the cologne, the perfume, the food cooking in the kitchen. There's loss of smell. In a lot of cases, there's poor posture. The person is more humped over. Their neck and shoulders are more humped over. Twitching and tremors, they just will not go away. So these are some things that, again, that when these things begin to happen, you need to show and have some sort of concern, because there are stages of dementia that we need to be mindful of.
Everybody that has a newborn baby just diagnosed himself with dementia. That's temporary. That's the difference of what's chronic and circumstantial.
That's why I say chronic versus temporary. These things are going to happen. And these things happen to us. But again, be mindful that dementia in most cases comes in stages.
Yeah. So what are some of those stages and what do those look like?
Yeah. And so let's unpack that, because again, what we're looking at is stages of dementia based on the global deterioration scale. Okay. And so basically this global deterioration scale kind of gives us some idea of where we are when we see certain symptoms, as far as what type of or what level of stage we may be in if dementia indeed is occurring in our life, and then what to do in either reversing some of these symptoms or preventing these symptoms from continuing and going into the next stage. And so again, this is very important to understand and note. The problem with dementia is that sometimes you may have the disease, if you will, starting to happen 20 years before you see symptoms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So think of it like this. You may be in your 40s and you may have some of the process of dementia starting to happen, the disease starting to take hold, if you will, but you won't show symptoms until you're in your 60s.
Wow.
So that's important to note, which kind of leads us into stage one. Stage one is simply the disease may be present. In other words, brain cells may be dying, plaque may be building up. That's what we mean by, again, the disease may be there, but there's no symptoms and there's no sign of cognitive decline. But it's starting to happen. Brain cells are dying. Again, like we said earlier, plaque may be building up, but there's no symptoms of cognitive decline. Number two, stage two is you have what's called age-associated memory impairment, which simply means this: maybe some memory loss. You may not remember, again, your first date or the name of the girl or guy that you had your first date with. You may not remember where you had your first date with your spouse. Where did we go? What did we do? What movie did we see? You may seem less organized. In other words, things may be more scattered in your home and in your family, in your car. There may be some normal forgetfulness. Again, where did I leave my keys? Where did I leave my phone? Where did I leave, my shoes or whatever it may be? And so these things are, again, very common in most cases. No really sign for alarm. And in a lot of cases, some will argue that by the time you're in your 50s or 60s, you have so many things in your mind, so many things to remember, so many things to do, so many things, that they kind of run into each other. And so, again, there's not a lot of concern at stage two. But stage three, you start seeing some mild cognitive impairment.
And this is where you should start to take note and
start to take note. But again, it's still reversible at this stage if need be, or you can start to slow down some of the symptoms. But you start having mild cognitive impairment, which means your functions may be normal, but there may be some deficiency in your memory. You may see some decline in your work performance. You may not be as sharp. You may not be able to give the presentation as quickly or as easily. You may forget the name of some important clients. You may forget maybe a luncheon with someone that you just had to see for that presentation or to make that deal or to close that deal. And so there's some deficiency in memory. And again, there may be some decline in your work performance. In some cases, you may get easily lost. You may be going to the airport, and maybe this airport you've been to once or twice before. You kind of know your way around, but you kind of forget where maybe the coffee shop was that you used to go to, or where or what gate you were supposed to be. You can't find the words as easily. You want to use a particular word, you want to use a word to define a particular subject or situation, and you just can't find that word. And you think about it, and you kind of almost take a moment to try to remember that word, and you just can't remember that particular word. Or in some cases, a particular name. It may be a name of a movie star or an actor, an athlete that you used to really appreciate or follow. And then all of a sudden, you can't remember that name of that athlete, that actor. It's kind of like, hey, I love watching Andy Griffith's show. I love watching, Barney Fife. But who was that actor again? Who was Barney's name again? Oh, it was Don something. Don Knotts, yeah. And so you have those moments that are more frequent. You cannot retain what you've read. In other words, you read this particular article, read this particular book, read this particular post, if you will, and you just cannot remember what exactly it was all about maybe an hour or two later. You want to discuss it with your spouse or a friend, or maybe use it in a sermon or whatever it may be, and you just cannot recall what you read. Also, during this time, you start having some moderate anxiety and denial of some of these things. And so when you can't find the words, when you get easily lost, when you struggle with work performance, this is really when you need to be thinking about what can I start doing and changing so that I don't go into stage 4.
Okay.
Stage 4 is when you start struggling to plan things. You want to plan a vacation, but you really can't plan it the way you'd like. You can't think of a time or date when to go. You say, hey, let's take that Alaska cruise in November. No, an Alaskan cruise in November
might not be
or
the best
December
time.
may not be the time, but you're just, focused on going to Alaska on that cruise in December or November, and they're going, no, this is not good planning. You can't navigate well. In other words, you want to go see your kids in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but you can't quite sure how to get there. You can't navigate the roads very well. You can't recall personal medical details. If someone says, hey, what was your blood pressure last time you went to see the doctor? You really can't remember. Or, what was your sugar level, glucose level, as at your last appointment? You really can't remember. So you cannot remember some of the personal medical details of your life. Familiar people may not always be recognizable. Or you may recognize them. You may know that they're a part of your life, but you really just can't remember or recall how you know them. Is it from church? Is it from a family reunion? Did we go to high school together? How do I know this person? And so familiar people may not always be recognizable. Stage 5 is when things start getting a little more difficult, a little more pernicious. In other words, you can't remember your own address. You can't remember even your date of birth. You have a hard time remembering the names of your grandchildren. You may be able to do some very basic things. You can still maybe feed yourself. You can still maybe bathe yourself. You can still maybe even dress yourself to some degree. But the basic things that you're to remember begin to leave you. And then there's stage 6. In stage 6, it becomes, again, a very difficult stage because you can't remember names of those close to you. You can't remember the names maybe of your spouse or of your children. You can recognize your own name in many cases, but you have a hard time remembering names of those that you care about. You become very suspicious. Who are these people in my room? Where did they come from? Why are they here? How do they know me? Sometimes your personality changes, and sometimes you become very violent. Now, again, in the movie The Notebook, this is what we begin to see. And so some of these cases, again, this is something to note. Sometimes you may come in and out of these stages. You may be in stage 4, but there may be a time where you're back in stage 3. Or you may be in stage 3 and find yourself, kind of being catapulted into stage 4. There may be some days when you're maybe even at stage 2 after being in stage 4 for a little while.
And you hear those, hey, he had a good day today.
Exactly.
Right.
He had a good day. He was on his game. He was in a zone.
Just recognized who I was today.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so these things do happen. And so this is what makes this diagnosis so difficult because, like you said, if maybe they got a good night's sleep, maybe they ate well, maybe they took a nice walk, maybe they had some social interaction. And so because of that, their brain was able to maybe function a little better than normal. But again, when you're sitting in front of the TV day after day after day, and not getting any real stimulation, you may stay in one of these stages longer.
Right. And that's a pattern of behavior that isn't healthy for anyone.
No,
right?
exactly.
So we know that it's not healthy for kids.
Exactly.
For their mental development. It's not healthy for teens. It's not healthy for adults. It's not healthy for somebody that has dementia.
Exactly. And then finally, of course, before we get into what to do to prevent, there's stage 7. And stage 7 is severe dementia, where there's complete dependency. You're not able to walk, not able to feed yourself. You can't express yourself. And these are the people, unfortunately, not to be too stereotypical, but the people we see often in our nursing homes. They just unfortunately get parked in front of a TV in a room somewhere because there's very little more one can do with them. Their body is still there. Their body is still, of course, alive and functioning, but they're not there. The person that you were raised, sitting at their table, maybe a grandmother or a parent, the person that used to play ball with you, the person that used to, tell you stories about, what they did in the war or whatever, they're not there anymore. And so and that's stage 7 of dementia. So what to do?
Yeah, that's a very alarming. I'm sure everyone's attention is
right.
Everyone is tuned in closely.
Yeah. So
what do we do?
Yeah. So if you're just now tuning into our program, we're talking about dementia, and we're talking about now what to do and how important it is to catch it early, so that again your brain can begin to heal itself. And so what we mean by that is that the brain functions in a way that it creates motivation to create activation. So your brain functions in a way that once you realize, hey, there's some things I need to do differently, it creates motivation and it creates activation to hopefully reverse some of the symptoms or slow the process of dementia. So here are a few things I think that we can do. Number one, to prevent or reverse symptoms of dementia, if you're just now tuning in, number one, and many will appreciate this one, get more sleep. Okay.
Go home and take a nap.
Go home and take a nap. It's okay. Get more sleep. Preferably at night, preferably
right.
for a long, nothing wrong with a nap.
Naps are great.
Jesus loved taking a good nap.
That's right.
And so, but get more sleep because again, this is where your brain begins to repair itself. Individuals who only get 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, they struggle. Maybe they go to sleep for an hour or two. And they get up, in the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, and then stay up to about 4 or 5, and then go back to bed and get up at 6. These individuals are going to struggle. So whatever that looks like, whatever you can do, there's some really great supplements on the shelves in the market today that may help you get more sleep. But getting more sleep. Number 2. Stop smoking, drinking, and drugs. Smoking and drinking, especially, can definitely impact the brain in a very negative, toxic sort of way. And so if you want good brain health, please stop smoking and please stop drinking if you want good mental health. And if you want to, again, prevent, slow down, or even reverse some of the early signs of dementia. Which leads to number 3. Again, most people know these things, but again, we're just kind to share some of this. More exercise. We've heard the story of where, Grandpa moved into our home and all he wanted to do is sit in front of the TV and watch Westerns and eat ice cream. That's okay, I guess, for a day, for an afternoon. But really and truly, the more exercise you get, the more you can just get out and walk. And if you're able to do aerobics, silver sneakers is a big thing right now, right? But do some aerobics. Weightlifting, believe it or not, really does enhance and help the brain. So exercise, I've met people who say, well, I don't want to train for the Olympics. You don't have to train for the Olympics.
Right.
But maybe take the stairs when you're on that cruise instead of taking the elevator. Do some walking around the track when you're on that cruise. Walk around your block a couple of times a week, minimal. But get more exercise. Walk more. When you're in the parking lot of your business, park a little further out, and so you can walk. The same is true with other. If you're at Walmart or whatever store you attend, use the parking lot. And if it's not too hot or too cold or whatever, but walk more. So walking, aerobic activity, weightlifting. Number 5, change your diet. Here's some foods that help, by the way, if you're just tuning in, that may be good for your mental health and may reverse some of the symptoms of dementia. Here's some foods that help. Eggs, sardines, fish, fruit, and spinach.
Okay.
So go to that, salad bar and get a little extra spinach on your plate, and let that, help maybe work and make your brain stronger and better. Reduce some of the processed foods and sugars in your life. We've seen that and heard that time and time again. But unfortunately, we're a culture that lives on processed food. So reduce the processed foods and sugars. Read more. I have an aunt that's 90 years old, and she is sharp as a tack, but she will tell you, as a retired school teacher, she will tell you that she reads at least 2 books a week. I'm talking novels. I'm talking she loves, John Grisham novels, but any novel, that she can read. And she'll read 2, sometimes 3 a week. So, and she is as sharp as a tack. She's 90 years old. She can tell you anything and everything about any subject, current, yesterday, today. She has an opinion on everything. She backs her opinion up with facts, and she's amazing, but she reads a lot. Cognitive tests. There's all sorts of things, tests you can take maybe on the internet. Memorize scripture.
Yes.
Memorize scripture. When was the last time you sat down and memorized maybe a chapter of the Gospel of John, or maybe the book of Romans, but memorize scripture. Next is social interaction. Again, we said, the grandpa that just sits in front of the TV and watches Westerns all afternoon, 7 days a week. That is not helpful. You need to talk and discuss and listen and share and get that brain moving.
Yeah, it activates different portions of your brain.
Yeah. Talk about things. Give your opinion. Talk about, what's going on in the world. Listen, read the newspaper.
Right.
Try to recall the names of, various world leaders, what's going on in Ukraine or Israel or whatever it may be. But social interaction. And so, again, get your loved ones involved. Next, create patterns. In other words, here's where I'll always leave my keys.
Right. That's just smart.
Here's where I'll always leave my phone. Here's where I'll always, put, my Bible. So that way I know where it is and I know what to do. And then last of all, spend some time fasting. Intermittent fasting. You don't have to go days or weeks or whatever fasting.
Some people hear fasting and they're like Jesus in the desert for 40 days.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And so, but what I'm pointing out is maybe some intermittent fasting. That seems to be helpful on many levels. Of course, always pray and spend time in worship, because I believe that when you pray and you worship, you are now definitely activating the spirit and the soul, which I will argue will impact the body, which definitely will impact the brain, which definitely will make things stronger and better in your life. So these are all some areas, again, that we can do to slow the process down, to maybe reverse the process if you find yourself maybe in stage 2 or 3, or even maybe even stage 4. But once you begin to see some of these symptoms, once you begin to become concerned or alarmed, once you begin to become even worried, that's when you need to start making some changes in your life and your lifestyle, maybe changes in how you interact with people, so that you can have the brain and the capacity and the life that God has given you to live out, so that you can live each day, whether in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s, in the way that God had intended.
Well, there you have it from the Family Answerman. Hope that this episode of the Family Answerman has been helpful. I hope you understand a little bit more about dementia and how you can deal with it in a healthy, positive way, whether it is on a personal level or if you are trying to find and understand someone that does have it and love them well through that. We hope that this episode of the Family Answerman, as always, has encouraged you and will inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, happier family.